Okay, thank you everybody. I think we'll have a few stragglers coming back with tea and coffee, and that is fine. But if we make a start now, I'd like to introduce the next part of this morning's programme. And I have two speakers, Sian Richards on my left from the National Mental Health Programme Board, and David David, an unusual spelt surname, from the Mental Health National Individuals Forum. So they're going to share this slot between them. We have 20 minutes or so from them, and then time for questions and answers. I've been told that actually in, I think, other conferences, the sort of small group contact and one-to-one contact has probably worked better in terms of having a chance to ask questions, and there is that opportunity today as well. So if you don't feel able to ask questions or make a comment in this large forum, then do be aware that both Sian and David are around for the rest of the day and for this afternoon's discussion as well. But if I hand over now to Sian.
Thank you, Jo. Prynawn da a croeso. Diolch am y cyfle I siarad gyda chi gyd heddiw. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all today. And I've come here primarily to retrieve my watch because I was the person who managed to lose my watch just before the event started. So having done that, I shall say goodbye. No, I shall stay for a few minutes. The session, as Jo's mentioned, is going to be in three parts, really. I'm going to give a little bit of context in terms of brief feedback from the events of last year, a little bit about our national processes for service engagement that we're developing, at which point I'll hand over to David to talk in more detail about the development of the national forum. And then I'll just say a few words about the National Partnership Board and invite a couple of colleagues from the Partnership Board who are in the audience today to come up and talk so that you have an opportunity to put a face to the names you may see on papers from time to time and have the opportunity to ask us a few questions. Oh, sorry. That's something I've never been criticised before, not being heard, rather that I have a rather loud voice. Is that better? Okay, so that's how we're going to run the session. So first of all, what did you tell us last year? As Jo mentioned, there were a series of events last year. They took place in May 2012, and there was an event in Newtown as part of that. And they were really, really timely for us because they were just before the formal consultation for the new Together for Mental Health strategy. So they were at a really, really good time to influence what ended up in the final strategy and to actually have a major impact on what ended up in the delivery plan that we've been asking organisations to take forward. Within your packs, there are a couple of papers. One is the conference report, which goes through in some details what came out of the three conferences. And then also within that is a response paper from Welsh Government, that's the one with the dragon on the top, showing what we've done against the 10 recommendations you brought out of those conferences. And there's also a paper that I believe Frida has written, which looks at the more local perspective, what's happened in Powys, to take forward some of those recommendations. So you'll be pleased to hear what I'm not going to do today is to go through all of those in detail. That's there, and if you want to pick up on any of that in this afternoon's workshop session, that would be great. What I really wanted to do is say something completely different based on the experience of hearing Jackie talk earlier. And wow, what a hard act to follow. But what the paper shows is that we have really tried within the new Welsh Government strategy to take on board all the recommendations that you raised. But looking at those and reflecting on what Jackie said earlier, what I do think is really different about this new strategy to previous strategies that we've had is that it is very much about hearts and minds. It's about attitudes and culture rather than about systems and processes that traditional strategies tend to be about. And what we're really serious about in terms of this new strategy is that real focus on the individual, which was coming out of Jackie's talk this morning. And in the strategy, you can see that in terms of some of the emphasis there on building resilience of people from an early age. And one of the things that Welsh Government has put a lot of commitment into is early years initiatives and good parenting skills. It's about supporting people as early as possible when mental health problems arise, so that we can actually try and keep people as independently as possible, rather than sucking them into that dependency model that Jackie described in terms of when people get into the secondary care system. Quite a bit of our work is focused around the individual. A piece of work David and I are doing together and Les at the back there, is looking at how we develop a set of outcomes that don't look at how the system's working. They're not based around that, but they're actually about putting the services, the care and treatment that statutory services provide in the context of a person's whole life. And that's a piece of work we call the outcomes from the service user lens. Similarly, the work that we're doing on setting up a nationalised core data set, again, isn't looking from the traditional systems and process perspectives. Most of our information and information technology systems in the NHS were actually built around appointment scheduling and looking at, how many people need to come to this appointment at that time. But what we're doing again is trying to set up a system around you as individuals, around us as individuals. And the final strand in that perspective, which is picked up on this slide here, is about tackling stigma and discrimination. And we look at that in terms of three perspectives. There's looking at it in terms of the self-stigma, helping people to develop their self-esteem, because that can be something that's really affected and lowers significantly at that point when people get a diagnosis of mental illness. It's looking at the stigma and discrimination that regrettably a lot of you will experience from our own workforces in the statutory and indeed the third sector. We recognise there's a huge agenda there. And finally, it's the more traditional aspect of stigma and discrimination, really, which is about changing public attitudes. So, as I say, rather than go through these points in detail, all of which are covered in that paper, I just thought that sort of built on what Jackie was saying and how I think we're really sort of coming from the same perspective in that. The final recommendation in your reports from last year was that you wanted a national service user mechanism to be developed. And what you said in the report was that you wanted that to influence policy, evaluation and monitoring. You wanted it to provide a two-way link between local and national mechanisms. And you wanted recruitment to that mechanism to be through open and transparent processes. And at this point, I'll hand over to David to tell you a little bit more about where we are in setting up that forum.
I get to do the exciting bit, which is just about meetings and structures. And if there's anything I really would not be wanting to talk about, it's meeting and structures. But I'm going to do it anyway, because it's important, and it's actually how we make this work. So, the National Partnership Board is important. Sian said a very brief amount about it, and there are people who are better placed to talk about it, and I can see some of them in the room because they sit on it. That's right, Karen, you sit on it. Alan, you sit on it, and there are others who sit it, and they'll be sitting here very shortly. It's an important national body, and one of the things that's unusual about it in national bodies is that 4 of the people sitting around that table will be service users and carers who are there specifically to ensure that the voices of service users and carers are heard at that highest possible level. And alongside that, to ensure that it isn't just the voices of 4 people, we've got a national forum which will be closer to 50 people, all again mental health service users or carers. The vast majority of these people will come from local partnership boards. So there are 7 local partnership boards. They're listed along the bottom there for those who are interested. And each of those is required to have at least 2 service users and at least 2 carers on those boards. And we already know that the first 2 to appoint them have chosen to have more than 2 service users and 2 carers on their board. So that will mean that we can have anything from 28 to 30, 35 service users, all of whom are sitting on local decision-making bodies that have the real power to affect people's lives. Now, had this been happening 10 years ago, we wouldn't have said had the power to affect people's lives. We'd have said had the power to influence mental health services. And it is a really important distinction. The partnership board, the national, and I assume the local, are made up of people, some of whom come from mental health services, but the vast majority of whom do not. They come from other services. And if, like me, you've spent a lot of time using mental health services, and in my language, a lot of time being mad, what you'll realize is what makes a difference to your life may be, for a tiny wee bit of it, mental health services. But actually, for the rest of it, it's where you live, who you spend time with, how you eat, what you do during the day, and so on and so forth. So these partnership boards are made up of people who have significant influence, not just in your mental health services, that kind of important 5%, but also people who have enormous influence over the rest of the stuff that's going on in our lives. So, so we have this forum made up of 30 or so people. I nearly said 30 odd people, and actually in my experience so far, that's not an unfair description. So 30 to 40 local service users and carers who sit on the local partnership boards, and they will be joined by 10 service users and carers who come from national perspectives or who are there to ensure that that group, that national forum of service users and carers of about 50 people reflects the broad range of people using mental health services in Wales. The Partnership Board will meet 3 times a year. The National Service User and Carer Forum will meet 3 times a year in between. And this will create an important link between the two. There is nothing worse, in my experience, than an service user or carer involvement approach that is just a meeting. You get your small slot on the agenda, and then everyone can go off and forget about it. When it is the case, and as it will be from December, that the Partnership Board will meet, there will be 4 service users and carers sitting around that table. They will then come back to the National Forum, 50 service users and carers, and they will talk about what went on at the last Partnership Board. And they'll talk about what we want to go onto the agenda for the next Partnership Board. And then, over the years that come, we will build up a really strong picture of what's important to service users and carers, and more importantly, how people in positions of power and influence are responding to that. And of course, this is in parallel with exactly the same process going on locally at the 7 local partnership boards. It will no longer be good enough to say, we've got a token service user and we've got a token carer sitting on our meetings. Now, there will be at least 4, often 6, 7, 8. They won't be token because they've been properly recruited. They won't be token because they'll be meeting each other. And if someone says in Powers, it can't be done, and someone in Betsy is doing it, then those conversations will happen. And they'll happen regularly and frequently. And by the time we're here next year, I'd like to think that we'll be talking about some of the positive changes that have happened. And I'd like to think it won't just be service users and carers saying things have got better because of service user and carer involvement. I'd like to think that professionals from all across health and social care and beyond are telling us that what they're doing is better because it's much more responsive to service users and carers. But in order for this to work, we need to make sure that we get good people into these roles. Now, locally, how are we doing in Powys for recruiting local representatives? Who would know about that? We're not quite sure yet. But around the country, the business is underway of making sure those local service users and carers are sitting on those partnership boards.
And if I can just add, the Minister has made it very clear he expects that to be completed by the end of this month for every local health board. So, Shane, get on with it.
Fantastic. Right. Okay, Frida and I haven't had a chance to catch up this morning, but so all around the country, all around Wales, this is happening as we speak. But alongside this, we're having regional conferences. This is the second, so we're in the kind of second box along the top there. We have application packs for anyone who is interested in being service user or carer representatives on that national partnership board. Helen, stand up and wave. Helen has the packs. I mean, I may just actually randomly ask people to stand up and wave for the sheer joy of it, but Helen has the pack. So if you're interested, or you think you might be interested, or you know someone who you think might be interested in being part of the National Partnership Board, Helen's got the packs. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Sian will be happy to talk to you about it. And the other people that you'll see who are already sitting on the National Partnership Board will also be happy to talk to you about that. And that's really important. You've got until the end of October to decide whether you want to do that. We will be, those 4 service users and carers will be selected by their peers. So they will be selected by people from the service user, the National Service User and Carer Forum. So it's not my choice, it's not Sian's choice, it's not the Welsh Government's choice, it's the forum's choice. And those 4 people will be the important link between the National Forum and the National Partnership Board. Applications close end of October, and within 2 weeks we will be able to have those people in place. The first, and this is the kind of tight times, the thing about working in Wales is nothing happens for 8 years or 10 years, and then everything needs to be done in about 2 months. And so it looks a bit tight, but on the 19th of November, there will be the first ever meeting of this National Service User and Carer Forum, and that will be the time at which the 4 people will be starting to talk to the 40 to 50 people on the National Forum who will have been talking to the hundreds of people who are involved around the country. They'll be looking at all the feedback we've got from the conference in Rhyl, which was 130 people. This conference here today, 120, 130 people? Certainly a good, there's way over 100 of you. We got another one in October in Cardiff, is that right, Les? Similar kind of number? Yeah. So the best part of 400 to 500 people will have had their say by the time that 40 to 50 people meet in November. And that will prepare those 4 people to join the National Partnership Board on the 2nd of December. And to my way of thinking, they will be most of my life has been spent either being the token nutter or sitting with some poor person who's been the token nutter. Those 4 people will be the least ever token people who've sat round the table, because they will have a legitimacy that should shame many people who think they're doing service user involvement but are actually still kind of thinking in token terms. So I'd like to think by the time those 4 lucky people, whoever they may be, sit round that table, they will have the weight of between 500 and 1,000 service users and carers behind them. They will have real power and real chance to have a say. And I think people will ignore them at their peril. And I think the other thing that I'd like to see is that when we have this group of 40 to 50 service users and carers that are meeting regularly, that are talking with each other regularly, that are drawing on experiences that are happening round Wales on a day-to-day basis, people will be bashing down their door to find out what they think about stuff. And that group, that forum, will become a very, very important place for developing our thinking. And when we come to see the next strategy in 10 years, 12 years, 15, 10 years' time, that will be absolutely driven by what service users and carers want to be in it. I think this last one has been fantastic. Knocks the socks off the stuff that goes in England and passes a strategy. It's already had far more service user and care involvement just to get this far. There's nothing this good in England. There's nothing this good actually anywhere else in the world. And if we do this well, this will really make service user and care involvement in Wales world-class. I'll kind of leave it there.
Thank you, David. We've mentioned the National Partnership Board on a couple of occasions in the last 10 minutes or so. Just to tell you a few words about that, the National Mental Health Partnership Board has been set up to oversee the implementation of the new strategy, and its role is a delivery assurance one. David's already mentioned a little bit about the makeup of the partnership board, but just a few things to highlight. Traditionally in Wales and in other countries, we've had separate strategies for children and young people, for adults of working age and for older people. The new Together for Mental Health strategy embraces all ages, so equally we've ensured that in terms of the people who are around the table at the partnership board, that there's similar interests. Because what people told us consistently in the consultation meetings about the strategies was where services break down, if they break down, it's often at the point of transition between one service and another, which is why we've taken this all-age approach. But what it absolutely isn't is age-blind, because it recognises all those issues. The strategy is cross-governmental, the partnership board rather, it covers all sectors, and that's picking up on David's point about the fact that, again, what you fed back to us is the care and treatment that you get from the statutory services is just one tiny bit of issues about your recovery. So it includes people from employment, from education, from housing, to ensure we're looking at all areas of life. It also covers mental well-being, so the mental well-being of all the residents of Wales, to try and improve that resilience, to prevent problems happening, as well as mental illness. And as we've discussed, it's got full involvement of service users and carers. We've had interim service users and carers for the first 3 meetings of the Partnership Board, and David's talked about the recruitment process for the rest. he mentioned that there were 30-odd members on the partnership board. You've now got the opportunity to make your own assessment as to how odd we are, which is probably the best introduction some of my colleagues have ever had. So I'd like to introduce the other members from the partnership board who are here today to join me on the stage, introduce themselves. It's really important we're open and transparent, and you know who's trying to take forward these issues for you and with you. So please, if I can ask colleagues to join me, introduce themselves, and then I think there's a few moments for questions.
Yes,
Joe.
if we could be relatively brief with the introductions, please. So there is some time for questions.
And one of our membership has run away already. John, where are you? You're not going to escape. Come on, you can stand.
Okay, who's going first? We only have a
Should we
few
start
minutes.
with ladies first at the end?
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? I'm Benna Waits. I'm Joint Head of Psychology, Counselling and Arts Therapies for Aneurin Bevan, although in fact for 10 years I played that role in Powys. So this is coming home for me today. I'm aware we're short of time, so I could talk to you about my role on the partnership board and the relationship to psychological therapies and increasing availability of those. But perhaps if that comes up in questions, we can pick that up.
Thanks, Benna. That would be far more interesting than what I've got to say, quite frankly. My name's Karen Howell. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of the Halvar Health Board. We work in collaboration with Powys Health Board and other health boards. I am the Chair of the Halvar Health Board Local Partnership Board, but I also represent the NHS in its entirety on the National Partnership Board.
Hi, I'm Alan Udell. I'm the Interim Service User Member of the Partnership Board. You can read what I do when you pick your application packs up from Helen to apply for the job that I'm vacating.
I'm Sian Richards. I've already introduced myself, Mental Health Strategy Lead for Wales.
I'm John Roach. I'm the Welsh Government's Head of Adult Mental Health and Vulnerable Groups. I've just rejoined the mental health branch. I previously worked for 4 years on the mental health measure between 2009 and 2012 before going off to work on another assembly bill. And I missed mental health so much, I've come back for more.
And that's us.
Wonderful, thank you. Oh, those were very brief introductions, thank you. That does leave us just 5 minutes for questions, but to bear in mind that there is this afternoon's workshop, and now that you know who everybody is, the opportunity to nobble them over lunch as well. But does anybody have questions now? Particularly, I think if there's anything to clarify any of the information that you've heard, that it might be useful for everyone to hear. But I think there's a question from that lady there.
Hello, I'm Andy Squares. I'm very interested in what perils are going to be inflicted on the people who don't listen. Somehow I get the feeling it's going to be a massive working sort of shop, talking shop, and very little will actually get to the top.
Perhaps I can answer that. In that one health board has already fallen foul of they were discussing about whether to have service users and carers on the actual partnership board at this health board, and the minister intervened. You know, there's no going away from it. The Welsh Government are totally for service users being involved at all levels. So from a service user point of view, in the 6 years that I've been involved in mental health in Wales, I've never seen anything like this. The commitment that's being shown by Welsh Government.
I'll just add to that, maybe. Actually, that's absolutely right, and the Minister was very kind enough to open an international conference in the west of Wales this year and stated exactly that. But in terms of how are we monitored, if you like, across our local partnership boards, we're actually monitored quite rigorously by Welsh Government. We have to supply returns. We have to fulfil the criteria within the strategy. For those of you who've taken the time to go through the strategy, you'll see there are quite clear outcomes right across all the departments of Welsh Government. So it's not totally focused on NHS, which is a good thing, because actually most people with mental health services don't necessarily need or use the NHS most of the time. They need a lot of other things. So we are rigorously monitored, and we have to supply returns. If we don't meet the criteria, Welsh Government intervenes very quickly.
Thank you. Laura.
If it's okay, the one with the mic asking a question. I just wanted to ask a question about language, really. While we continue to use the language of mental illness as if that's the only understanding of these experiences, and why we continue to use the terms service user as if that's the only kind of individuals that might want to get involved. I think, as we heard from Jackie earlier, she would have a lot to give to this, but I do wonder whether she would consider herself a service user. So I just wondered if there was debate about language and whether we thought that that was needed.
In terms of the mental illness issue, you will note that is not what the strategy is called. It's about mental health and well-being, and that was very specific and deliberate. In terms of the phrase service user, that has been raised, and normally you find that there are many views as to what's the preference, as there are people in the room. We have called the forum at the moment the Service User and Carer Forum because, in a sense, you know, it is what's in the tin. That is not necessarily its longer term name, and I am sure that one of the issues that we will be debating at the first formal meeting in November is that very issue. And David, you may want to add to that. You will.
Yeah, yes. I mean, having been involved in this field for what's frighteningly close to 30 years now, you know, there is no word or phrase you will find that either suits everybody or doesn't annoy a significant number of people. So I think we would be setting ourselves up to fail if we promised to come up with a term or description that worked for everybody. However, we have made it clear that it's kind of up to the forum what it calls itself. But until it exists and is populated, there's no better group to have that discussion, or there isn't a group to have that discussion. So it's almost just shorthand at the moment, waiting for that perfect solution, which perhaps one of those 45 people will have. But it is also important to note that language and thoughts and feelings and behaviour are inextricably linked, and the words we use are important. And so, I mean, I don't doubt for a minute, and I've written much on this, that the language that we use and the words that we use are important. But the one thing we can say with complete confidence is this is not about mental illness, and nor is it fixed in any particular model of how we describe mental distress, mental illness, and so on.
And if people want to help us with that debate for the best name, we can pick that up in the workshop session this afternoon.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm aware, Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off because...
It's only pertinent in terms of that if it's the service user group that's going to define what the terms are, you need to know that people can apply to the service user group, the types of people that can apply. So is it people that do currently use services, or is it people that have got an interest in mental health that can actually apply for this forum?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Is that something we can clarify this afternoon?
The criteria are explicit and they are in the pack. I can't remember off the top of my head, but for the service users, it's recent service use. Now, there is a difference in experience between people who may need services, which is all of us, and those that have recently used services. And we start with that. So, and in terms of caring, it is the same. So we have a criteria. Is it 5 or 3 years? I can't remember what.
5 years, because one of a very strong message that we had when we had a sort of interim forum meeting in July from the 80 or so people who attended that was that many of the people in that room who were, if you excuse me using the phrase, service users and carers, sometimes felt frustrated that people allegedly representing them at meetings as experience of services maybe 20 years ago. So we did talk about this 5 years of experience of service use, but that service use isn't necessarily traditional secondary care services. It may well be support and advice through the third sector, support and advice through primary care, through your GPs. So it's not, 5 years of serious mental illness. And again, that's important in that move from a mental illness focus to mental health and well-being.
Thank you.